Love Where You Live is brought to you by Live Love Local Michigan, the online and print magazine celebrating Michigan through amazing adventures, stunning photography, high-profile content, and more. Subscribe to our monthly print magazine for exclusive content you won't find on our free online magazine. With your subscription, you also receive automatic entry into our monthly subscriber Spend Local Michigan and surprise pop-up giveaways with prizes so magical, you'll think you found a pot of gold at the end of a Michigan rainbow. Subscribe online at livelovelocalmi.com. As everyone in the United States should know by now, the UAW union voted to go on strike this past Thursday. And with that strike, two of the largest arguments that are coming out of this by those who sit on the right or people who are anti-union or are taking in the fear-mongering that's going on from the right with this anti-union rhetoric are two arguments. Basically, the first one is that the cost of cars are going to skyrocket and be pushed to over $100,000, even though, newsflash, a lot of them are already creeping up to that number today. And several of them are already over that number of 100,000 when the average UA worker makes $18.54 an hour as we speak. And then the second argument is that this strike is going to push the big three to move all production overseas, and we're going to lose manufacturing here in the United States. So those are the two arguments that are coming from people who are anti-union and on the far right. And so what we're going to do in this podcast today is we are going to unpack specifically the cost of a car. And then with our guest today, we're also going to talk about what he thinks about this whole argument of if we give the union what they want, or if the big three gives the union what they want, that all production is going to move overseas. So today I have a guest. His name is William Graham. William has worked he's my brother. I'm going to let you explain what you've done, William, over the course. So what are your credentials for being able to talk about this?
I've worked for two of the top 40 tier one auto suppliers in North America and the world, as a matter of fact, for Cooper Standard Automotive. Their global headquarters is in Novi, Michigan, and Forcia Automotive, now called Forvia. Their global headquarters is in Nanterre, France. So in 2013, I started working at Cooper Standard, and then 2015 we had a mass layoff there because of restructuring, and then I went to work at Forcia from 2015 until 2022.
Okay. So you and I have had lots of conversations about this and, over the years, not even with this strike, like even prior to the strike, like the cost of vehicles and why things are so expensive. And it's not for what people think it is. It isn't. Vehicles are not expensive because we pay people, UAW workers, or would even pay UAW workers living in fair wages. It honestly doesn't really have much to do with the actual overall cost of a vehicle and these massive profits. Start from the top and explain why a vehicle is so expensive. And it is important to note that in 2023, today, the average cost of a vehicle at this moment is $46.2 thousand. That is the average cost of a vehicle. It's pretty damn high. The average UAW worker right now is making $18.54 an hour, and some of them even without benefits. So that's not the reason that cars are expensive. So why don't you break that down?
So yeah, the basic thing is that the OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers, is what their acronym is. They really don't. Their plants, they just assemble. It's like collecting all the puzzle pieces, like in a 1,000-piece puzzle box. You dump the puzzle pieces out, and you start sorting through them, and you put them in order and start putting the puzzle together. Well, that's what GM, Ford, Chrysler, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, all of them do. They barely, especially the Japanese automakers, they're the ones that started all this just-in-time manufacturing techniques. They don't really build all of their parts in-house anymore. Back in the 60s and 70s, when GM was the largest company in the world, all their plants scattered all over the United States because they built everything in-house. Your radios, seats, dash panels, everything from nuts and all the way down to the nuts and bolts of the car were built in-house by General Motors. They were in subsidiaries of General Motors like Delphi or AC Delco, things like that. And then they were all shipped into the plants and they were assembled. They don't do that anymore because it's not cost effective for them, because one, you have to own all the plants or lease the plants that you have to keep open, all the payroll for the employees at those plants, the management at those plants, the payroll, the benefits, all the money tied up into your commodities that you put into the vehicle. It's just not cost effective anymore. It was back in the 70s when American Motors Corporation, that was one of the big four in the United States. It was the smallest of the four automakers in the United States. That was an American company. They couldn't compete on the same scale as Ford, Chrysler, and GM because they were so small. They innovated. They're the first ones that started taking on the Japanese philosophy of just-in-time manufacturing and outsourcing all of their component making. They started out with smaller companies that would make their ejected molded plastic pieces that go into their cars, their grills, and all that stuff. So they didn't have to have that in-house. So that basically they would just order it from these companies. They'd ship it into the plant, then they would take it as they're building the car and bolt it on. So nowadays, the biggest thing is these tier one auto suppliers like Forcia, Cooper Standard, Bosch, ZF or ZF, whatever part of the world you're from, they're the big auto suppliers. They're global companies. They're also for-profit companies. They have to make money on the parts that they sell to GM, Ford, Chrysler, BMW, Honda, all the OEMs globally. Stellantis, because Stellantis is now like one of the top 7 automakers in the world. They're profit-driven organizations, just like every other company out there. They got to build all their parts. They got to have their employees. They got to have their management structure. They got to have their executive structure. They got their board of directors. They got their shareholders. Always, and that's the big thing everybody talks about when you talk about publicly traded companies is shareholder value. You got to make that money for those shareholders. So when they get contracts, they bid on these contracts for new model years. So cars change every couple of years, either getting a refresh or they're getting a new redesign. And those contracts go out for bid, 2 or 3 years prior. So we'll talk about GM in specific because it was in Chrysler, because it was one of the last 2 projects that I worked on before I left Forcia. So Chrysler, Sterling Heights Assembly Plant, SHAP, was where the Dodge Ram pickups are made. So they would assemble all the pieces. So Forcia had a joint venture called SAS, and I can't remember, it was something automotive systems. There was a joint venture. They bought it out and brought it in-house. So I was in charge of converting them over to the Forcia SAP system, which is the ERP system used for planning, scheduling, production, your accounting, and all that. What people don't seem to realize, though, is what SAS did now. It was really complicated because they were the tier one supplier of the completed dash assembly for the Ram pickup. Now think of how many variations of a dash assembly there is for a pickup. You wouldn't think there's very many, but it's upward to 500 variations just based on the options that people want into those vehicles. And what they do is they send out a broadcast signal. Chrysler SHAP plant would send out a broadcast signal to SAS saying, this is the vehicles that we're going to build in the next 10 days. This is the order by VIN number that they're going to be built in. This is how we need you to build these final assembled dashboards, put these in racks so racks, we call them racks, is what they hang the assembled dashboard in. And it was in order based on scanned. It had barcode scans and QR codes on it. So when they go off the line, they can scan them in order and put them in the vehicles as they come down the assembly line. Now, imagine that a dashboard, how many components go into this? So you have not only just the plastic molded dash, you have the bezels, the airbag components, and all that things. All those parts are made by different companies. Or some company makes 2 or 3 of those parts, but they have to ship them to another company to have them bolt on their piece. Then they ship them to another company that bolts on their piece. Then they send it to Forcia for final assembly. So you're talking, if you have...
Forcia then sends it to General Motors
send it to
or
Stellantis, the SHAP, when it's completed, when they order it. Now, it was ordered. Now, so they get the broadcast signal they have to have come in. Now, some of the parts they have to have within a 2-hour time window, which is the just-in-time philosophy. They send out a signal. You have to deliver within that 2-hour window. If not, you shut down the production line. And then Stellantis will charge upwards of $10,000 to $20,000 per hour to Forcia for shutting down their production. So the companies are fined. But the dashboards come fully assembled. That's with all your radios, your airbags, your heating, air conditioning, all your knobs, your bells and whistles, gadgets, buttons, wiring harnesses, everything. All that stuff is put inside this dashboard as assembled at the final assembly, put in a rack, scanned in with the barcode on it to say that it goes in this order. And then the racks are put on a truck. The truck drives over to SHAP. They are unloaded at the loading dock, and they're taken right to the assembly line. What happens at the assembly line is Forcia does not get paid for that dashboard until it is actually physically bolted into the vehicle. Just because it's basically a consignment sale. So we ship all this material over there and we don't get paid for it until they actually consume it. So if you put that, if because some of these workers at these other tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, they only get paid 10, 12, 13 bucks an hour because a lot of these companies are foreign owned and they don't believe, in their countries, they have a lot strict labor laws where they're forced to pay people, where here they think it's great because they can shit on their employees, treat them like crap. They actually bring people over from Europe to work here on contracts and company sponsored visas. And they basically tell them, we're not going to give you a raise for the 3 or 4 years that you're here. You wanted to come to the United States and work. We'll bring you here, but you're going to get paid like shit. So they bring them over here on those work visas, and those employees, they can't leave the company because if they do, their work visas are canceled and they have to go back home, or if they have to go to another company that's willing to sponsor them on a work visa, or they have to either apply for,
just do the same thing,
or they have to apply for citizenship or residency or marry a U.S. national or some sort. One of the companies I worked at, my direct manager was from France. His wife was an American citizen. They had met while she was going to school in France, and they got married. He was working in the United States, and he was basically being told he wanted raise, and they kept telling him no, and they wouldn't promote him either. And I was talking to him about this, and I was like, dude, your wife's American national. You can get your residency like that, like a snap of a finger, because she's an American citizen. And you've been married before you even moved to the United States. Plus your kids were born here. They're American citizens now. You have the company by the balls and they don't even know it. You can go and demand and tell them, if you don't, you're leaving the company. You're going to go find another job, which they told him, you can't, you're here on your work visa. And he's like, oh no, my wife's American. I applied for my residency. Here's my residency. Here's, his resident alien green card. So he showed him that.
Yep.
They were pissed. And I'm like, don't tell him I told you that, because I don't want to suffer the repercussions of it, because he's like, no. He thought it was great. Well, not long after that, he got promoted, got a nice fat hefty raise, and he was quite thankful because I told them what was going on, because they aren't going to explain this to their employees. But
absolutely not.
Back to the assembly part. So yeah, all these parts that these tier 1 suppliers have, they take on most of the risk, because, like I said, with the strike going on now, they are going to have parts sitting in their warehouse. They're continuous operation, repetitive manufacturing.
So it's really not the big 3 who are going to be losing the money. So to be all of these tier 1, 2, 3 suppliers who don't actually get paid for even the production until it's actually physically bolted.
Well, yeah, the big 3 will suffer because they are the ones that get the sale price. What was I reading the other day is that between $25,000 and $45,000 profit on each pickup truck sold. Yeah.
What?
They're talking to between $25,000 and $45,000 profit on each pickup truck sold in the United States. And the reason why a lot of these vehicles are expensive is because, well, people want all the bells and whistles. They think, oh, great, I need heated seats, I need air conditioned seats, I need massaging seats. So it reminds me, when I worked at one of the plants down in just outside Louisville, Kentucky, it was a seating plant for Ford. It was owned by Forcia. For the Ford F-250, F-350, and the Ford Expedition, the assembly line was at the Ford Kentucky truck plant. Do you know how many variations of one seat there was for a Ford pickup truck?
I remember you telling me it was
over 1,500.
Yeah, that just blows my mind.
1,500 variations of a seat, because everything's different. You got massage, heat, air, lumbar support, electric, crank, leather trim, the King Ranch edition with the stenciled in King Ranch logo, the regular gray pattern, black pattern, charcoal pattern, or jet black. You had the vinyl seats, all that, bench seat, not just a bucket seat, but a bench seat, all that just for seats. Now you figure you're paying, they're paying anywhere from $300 to over, I think it was, if I don't, this may be the wrong number, I can't remember, it was so long ago now, but I think it was almost at like $5,000, from between $300 and $5,000 for a seat. So like if you're per seat,
depending on the bells and whistles you put on it.
That's right. So when and again, they don't pay for these seats, they send out a broadcast signal based on the VIN numbers, that they're going to do. And then the seats are sent in. And then every once in a while, you'll get that emergency call that the seat's broken or something. There's something wrong with it. It's not, because the seats are put on a pallet that they sit on. They're bolted to, like they're bolted to the floor of the vehicle when they're being come. So it's actually an assembly line for the seat. So the seat frames we made in Mexico and shipped them up from Mexico to the U.S. So the bottom of it, the back of it, then were bolted together, shipped or separate. They're bolted together on the assembly line. Then all the components go in. Then they wrap it in whatever cloth or material as it goes down the assembly line. And each part that goes into it is scanned so that we know they can reorder. So it's scanned. And then if the seats as they go down the assembly line, they lock into a fixture. If you scan the part and it's not the right part for that VIN number, the fixture locks and you can't move the seat. So you can't send it down the line wrong. So
Interesting.
if it locks, you got to figure out what component's wrong or what you did wrong. And as the seat goes down the assembly line, as they're on these pallets, you can plug them in. They're called testers. So they can test the lumbar support, all the electric components in it to make sure that they work before they go to Ford. But as they go down the line and then they're shipped, they put them in the truck on these pallets based on the sequence. So that's what it's called. It's called sequencing. They're sequenced in order. And then when they go to the truck, they take them right to the shop or the assembly point, and then they pull them off in that order. And then they go onto the assembly line, and then they're bolted into the truck as it goes down the assembly line.
So how many different companies does like a seat go to or a dashboard go to with all these different components and all of these different components being made by a different company? Like, what is the average number of businesses that these go to or assembly lines for different companies before it actually gets to the final destination?
Well, so it's not really like an assembly line in most parts. So between the seats and dashboards are different because the seats are components are like just like any other thing. You can have a seat that has the heated seating element. That's not really an assembly line thing. That's just a piece of that's just something that's plugged into the seat. That's a heating element that's made by a manufacturer. But you figure anywhere, everything outside of the seat frame and the seat frame is made by someone else, or the leather and the stitching are done sometimes at Forcia plants or at another plant, or depending on who the seating company is, like Lear, or it used to be Johnson Controls. They're now Adient. I think it's Adient. They're a seating manufacturer, so they do some of those things in house, but it's different plants that make these different parts, and then they ship them all into one place where it's assembled. Then it goes from that assembly when it's a final seat sent to the OEM where they put it on the assembly line and they goes into the vehicle. So all the components that go into it, nuts, bolts that go to bolt the seats together are not made in house. Those are come from another manufacturer. Your cranks for the lumbar, or the buttons that you do that you can fold the seat back or lay it back and forth if it's electric. That's not made in house at Forcia or whoever. That's another company. Even with the TV screens that you get in the back seats for the entertainment systems, those come from Asia, the Asian market. They're either assembled in Mexico or China. Those all come from overseas. So yeah, it's 99% of the parts that go into those seats are from different, depending on what the seat variation is. All the components are made from different companies.
It's hard to wrap my head around that just-in-time manufacturing, JIT, as you refer to it, saves money, because it seems like since they started doing the just-in-time production, the cost of vehicles have skyrocketed.
Well, that's the thing is the pricing. They put the price in there to make they price the vehicles where their profit is. Just like when the contracts go out to these the suppliers, they have to figure out what their costs are, and then they bid the contract to see how to make their profit on it. And you got to figure too is once you get the contract for one of these as a supplier for one of these pieces that go into a vehicle, for the life cycle of that vehicle, you supply it, and you supply spare parts to. I can't remember. It wasn't GM direct. It was their parts supplier for like repairs. If their seats broke,
something happens.
Yeah. Or if you're in a car accident or whatever, all those pieces have to be replaced. So you have that calculated into you make so many extra of those. But even when the car goes out of production, you have to keep that tooling, those machine parts, those part numbers in your computer system for on average of 10 years after that car goes out of production. So if 8 years after GM closed, So after GM say the Chevy Malibu, for example, that's made in Fairfax, Kansas, their 2012 just past the 10-year mark. The model is a lot different than it is now. These companies just started ridding their inventory of the machining and tooling and their fixtures that would able to produce parts for that car, even though it's been 10 plus years. Because if GM calls up and says, "Oh, our warehouse is out of parts for these things. We need you to come up and make a 20,000 piece run of this material." Well, that's now on whoever owns that contract. You have to spend that money out of your own pocket to produce those parts, even though they've been out of production for so long. So you got to pull that machine, those tools out of mothballs, get it put back in the plant up and running. And, you got to test it. You got to do test runs and everything to make sure that it's producing right, because whatever you got to make whatever the demand is for those parts. So like if it's a dashboard piece, it's multiple colored, it's textured, it's not textured, it's got stitching in it, whatever. You have to produce what GM says, and then, you take it back out of production, send it off to the mothball warehouse, and then you go, as you're producing your current materials, so it's
that's kind of a pain. It sounds like
it is a pain, and it's ultimately that would be as a money loser for them, but that's the risk that you take, because they do make money off these. I mean, Forcia
they make a lot of money.
So at one time, when I worked at Forcia, now called Forvia, 1 in 5 vehicles globally on the road had some component that was made in a Forcia plant in them. So that you figure how many cars are on the road. Yeah, that was a significant. That's why Forcia is one of the top 10 tier 1 suppliers globally, because they had different divisions. They had exhaust or emissions control, seating, interiors. So seating and interiors is different. You make seatings for seats, interiors is your dashboards, door panels, all your plastic molding, wood trim, stuff like that for your higher end models. And then they had so you had seating, interiors, emissions control. They bought out Clarion Electronics when I was there, so like the Clarion radios and all that stuff was now Forcia. And then they had at one time an exteriors portion where they made actual plastic or composite nose pieces for vehicles that had to be painted. So we had to make them in plastic molded and things, and then pressed and sent off to a company that would paint them the color of the vehicle that's going down the assembly line, and they'd send it back to us. We'd pay them. Part number would change. We'd ship it off to whoever. But they ended up selling that business unit off to Plastic Omnium when we were in the process of buying out another company, because it was a regulatory thing. We couldn't keep on to it. But yeah. So the automotive industry is not as cut and dry as people think it is. It's not General Motors just saying, "Hey, we're the largest." That's why they're not the largest company in the world anymore, because they divested all that stuff. They by attrition or layoff, they started going with all like everyone else. They started ordering all these parts where they don't have to. Only thing they do is pay for it when it goes into the vehicle. I mean, yes, they design it. They help with the tooling. When these companies, it's fascinating when you see a 22-ton injection molding press being put into a plant. Basically, they put these injection molding machines on the floor before the walls are even built around, because they're so large. And when they change out the tool, which is the mold itself, they have a 22-ton crane that slides on rails across the ceiling that can move these things. They're big, giant steel. They're about the size of a semi-truck. The tool is, or fixture is, that they have to lift up just for a door panel. And it's hot. It's so like the plastic pellets are usually bought from companies like Dow Chemical, their performance plastics division, or another company. So ultimately, Dow back in the day had Dow Automotive, where they were a tier 1 or a tier 2 auto supplier, because they sold those directly to those companies. So it's spread out across the board, and all those companies are for-profit companies. They got to make money on it.
Well, and they do. They make significant profits on it.
They do, but they're not. I mean, like the tier 1 suppliers are not as profitable as Ford, GM, or Chrysler. I mean, they're ultimately the masters of the universe. We have to do what they say, and you have to suck up to them just to make sure that you keep new business coming into your company with them. So you have to bend over backwards for them. Even when I was working at Forcia, we had gotten in our hands slapped a couple of times by GM. And to make nice with GM, we basically built a plant out in the middle of a field in Spring Hill, Tennessee, for General Motors assembly right there in Spring Hill, because they basically told us, if you want any more new business, you're going to do this. And we, okay.
So they built an entire
They
plant.
bring a brand new plant for interiors division. And on top of that, there was another one of our competitors called Yanfeng Automotive. I keep saying our, like I still work there. Their competitor.
Yeah.
It's just habit. Well, Yanfeng Automotive was in China making door panels for the vehicles assembled in Spring Hill, Tennessee. And we made some of the door panels for the vehicles made in Spring Hill, Tennessee. So Yanfeng would send them 3 containers full a week to the U.S. They would get dropped off at Forcia's doorstep. We would take the material out of the containers and put them in sequence with our materials that would go to Spring Hill. And
so it was a blend.
Yeah.
So you could have like a door on either side that were from 2 different companies.
Yeah. Yep. 2 different companies assemble it, but they're the same.
Wow.
They'd be identical, but
yeah, but not
one made in China, one made in Tennessee. Yeah.
So are these doors? So say that happened. You have a door from Forcia and a door from, or a door from built in Tennessee and a door built from China. One of each on your car. Are there stickers that say where it's made?
So inside the door panel, if you actually took your door panel off and flipped it over, you look at it. There's a barcode on there, and in that barcode, it'll have either whatever the company's logo and name of who made it on there.
And so what's the cost difference between an identical part being made, one in China and being shipped overseas, and one in Tennessee, and then being assembled right there?
The funny thing is, I asked the guy from General Motors that while we're in Tennessee, Spring Hill, we're getting ready to go live with the plant, and I asked him, where's your cost savings from having your front door panels made in China and your rear door panels made here in Tennessee? You're paying, I mean, granted, yes, the labor is cheaper in China and you're getting a deal that way, but the shipping cost and we're charging you a fee on top of that to sequence that into your production with our stuff. So where's your cost savings? And he's like, well, the buyers and logistics really don't interact well at GM. So there's probably not, but as long as one side of the business thinks they're saving money, the other one doesn't really give a shit.
Oh my God. So they may not necessarily be saving money, but just as long as they think they are saving money.
It's the perception of that they're actually saving money. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But that's, again, then if
that's happening at a grand scale.
Yeah, if you go in and ask people this, well, who's at fault for this? They'll blame the worker on the shop floor for it. That damn greedy union worker that's working on the assembly line, that's all their fault. Not the management's fault that's making this decision, or the jackass and the buyer that's making this decision. Oh, I got $300 discount from Yanfeng to build this in China for the front door panels, but we got to have a plant here to sequence it and do the JIT for us in the US. So we'll pay more for Forcia's plant to produce the back door, but they're going to do the sequencing and they're going to lay right across the highway from us so we can get all those parts into the door. So we don't have to keep this shit on our lot. And if it gets damaged, well, it's up to Forcia and Yanfeng to fight it out who fucked it up. And then we don't care as long as we have our parts.
Oh, my goodness.
And the best part of it was General Motors expected Forcia to go into the GM global management system to do the goods receipt of that container of shit that came in from China. We had to log into their computer system and do the goods receipt to put it in their inventory.
So oh my gosh.
Yeah. I asked the guy at the Tennessee plant. There was a plant in Lansing that was closed because the production of one of the Cadillacs down there at Lansing Grand River was going out of production. So that interiors plant was being closed. Well, all those people took jobs to go to the new plant in Tennessee. And the one guy that went down there was doing that at there. And I'm asking him, I was like, are you getting paid extra for this? He's like, no, it's just expected of us because GM wants it that way. So that's how you go bet these tier ones bend over backwards and kiss the ass of General Motors or Ford or Chrysler when they do something stupid like that.
And then all of the blame gets put on
the assembly line worker, the union workers.
Union workers.
Yep.
And they become the enemy of everybody. Because everybody's blaming them for the cost of vehicles being so high. And then the cost of vehicles will, quote unquote, skyrocket now if they get the concessions that they want in their union contract, which, as you've just explained, is a crock of bullshit.
Basically, yeah. Well, and the thing is, too, is I tell people this is, so as a tier one supplier, a lot of the tier one suppliers, their plants are non-union workers. Some of them are, because it just depends what state they're in, like Ohio and Michigan. And
But in
I can't
other states, there are no unions
well,
down there.
they are, but they don't have any bargaining power. But what blows my mind is Ohio. They're a big union state. They want their union benefits. They want their union employees, but yet it's a red state.
They vote against it.
Yeah, they vote their own economic interests. Well, most of them are single issue voters. They're going to take our guns or abortion or gays in the military or something stupid like that.
Right.
Same thing here in Michigan, because when they had the last strike at GM, they were talking about it just before the 2020 election. GM had a strike, and they were talking to people down at Flint truck assembly plant. Who are you going to vote for? And they're, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. Well, you're a union guy. Why are you voting for Donald Trump? Because the Democrats are going to take our guns.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that makes all kinds of sense in the world. You want to vote for a guy that wants to abolish unions and take away your collective bargaining rights just because you want to have a gun. Makes sense.
Yeah. Which isn't going to happen anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's another whole other story, but no, right.
Another conversation.
But another story with this is when I was at one of the plants, and I don't want to go into specifics because if somebody hears this, it's probably some information that no one needs to know for who did what. But one of the plants I went and worked at, it was a brand new plant, opened up, and they were inside of industrial park. Now, these plants are all built within a short distance of the assembly points, just because of the just-in-time part. So they built the plant, I think it was 25 or 30 miles away. They were having the hardest time getting quality employees there. I mean, they were getting people that were coming in from the county jail on tether, people that were, the first 2 weeks there, out of the first 15 days that they worked there, they were 2 or 3 hours late every day for 10 of them, something. They were handing out brand new 72-inch flat screen TVs to people that showed up for work every day on time for the first, 60 days. They had literally a fight club going on in the back parking lot.
Literally, I thought you were joking. No. It was a literal fight
club because people were fighting inside. They were duking it out on the shop floor at the plant at night because somebody was getting pissed at something or other. So the management let them go out back and fight it out. There were some mass firings and all that stuff, but they actually had. First, they tried one of these facial recognition robots they had stationed at the doors when you came in. Your badge that you had to carry on, you had one of those QRF code beacons in it. Yeah. Well, so it was when you got within range of it, that robot was supposed to pick up the QR codes to say that you're supposed to be there, and it would unlock the door for you to go in. If it didn't, it wouldn't open the door. You had to call somebody to come let you in. Because they had a guy literally walk in off the street, pull a gun and stick it in a guy's face at the time clock and threaten to blow his head off for messing with the guy's girlfriend on third shift. So the company, after the robot failed to recognize people, they had to pay the county deputy a county deputy for 3 shifts to sit in the parking lot in his patrol car every day while production was running. A county sheriff deputy sat in his patrol car in the parking lot, watching the door, waiting for something to happen at this plant and it was months that they had to do this before.
But the point that you haven't made yet with this is the wage.
Right.
The wage that they were paying.
So as I was getting to that, so they were built this plant inside of industrial park. So as you pull in off the highway, you pull in all these industrial areas. These plants have signs posted, starting pay $18.50, $19.50, $20 some dollars an hour. You go to this site, they started their pay at $13 an hour. It was like $5 less than everyone else in the industrial park. And I'm like, you don't see a problem here? I mean, I can see it pulling in, and you wonder why you're getting, the bottom of the barrel workers that can't show up on time because, well, one, they can't afford a car at $13 an hour. It was insane. Well, the first few months of the production of this plant were terrible, absolutely terrible. The OEM that we were supplying literally came in and told our executive committee, if you don't fix this within the next 3 to 6 months, we're pulling the contract and we're giving it back to the company you took it from. They literally had that company coming in on the weekends, touring the plant to see how the operations were laid out so they could bring their people in to take over at a moment's notice. Well, finally got to the point where the OEM finally said, you know what? the people that worked at this plant that are now at this plant's now closed for this other supplier, you're going to hire those people and pay them this amount of money. That company was basically put over, their feet held to the fire, and they were forced to do it because that plant was a UAW sponsored plant, and they were basically, we're had enough with this non-union bullshit at these suppliers. They're going to be unionized. And the people that worked at the plant that lost a contract were UAW representative. They came in and they demanded collective bargaining, and they had to do it because if not, they were going to lose the contract, and all that money they invested in opening this plant, millions and millions of dollars, were going to be flushed down the toilet.
Oh, because they wanted to pay cheap labor.
Yeah, when you pay shit wages, you get shit employees.
Mm-hmm.
And then they expect loyalty. They want these people to work there.
They absolutely expect loyalty.
They want you to come in and work 10, 13 hours, no problem. But, well, here's a flat screen TV for, being here for every day for the first 60 days.
That blows my mind. That blows my mind.
Well, it reminded me when I worked at Dow Chemical, when they divested their supply chain out of Dow Chemical's business units, and they opened up what they called their business process service center. They opened one in Mumbai. They opened one in the United States. And we were talking with some of the people in Mumbai. One of the chemical plants that was a subsidiary, wholly owned subsidiary of Dow in Chennai. Is it Chennai, India?
There's Chennai is in India, yeah. Yes.
It was Chennai or Pune. I can't remember, one of the two. Well, anyway, the employees that worked in that plant, they never gave them raises. Only thing that they gave them was a place to shower and free food. And then people would work until from sun up to sundown. No problem. Not because of the wages, but because they had a place to shower, clean running water in the plant, and food. That was it. I was like, wow, that's a pretty good motivating factor, not to starve and be able to take a shower.
That's disgusting. It truly is. It's truly disgusting. But all of this, the point that we're trying to make here is that the cost of a vehicle, it really, the wages for UAW really doesn't really play a large role into the cost of what a vehicle is. And these union workers who are striking, who are demanding fair wages and living wages, are not asking for too much, or what they're asking for is not unreasonable, and it really isn't overall going to affect the cost of a vehicle when they have the first 6 months of this year combined a $21 billion with a B profit.
Well, there's the thing I want people to realize too, and there's a video on YouTube that it just kind of shows you why cars are built.
I can put the link in.
I showed you that video. Put that link on there. So what it is, it's a video of a 50s era Chevy Impala taking on I think it was a 2012, between 2012 and 2017 Chevy Malibu, and an offset head-on collision at 35 miles an hour. And it shows that 50s era Impala. Everybody, they don't make them like they used to. They don't make them like they used to. Well, you should be damn well glad they don't make them like they used to, because in that video it shows that Impala being obliterated, and the crash test dummy in there being killed by flying debris, and its head decapitation when the roof collapses on it, and the A-pillar basically severing his jugular vein, and the airbags and everything else inside that newer car saved the other one. He walks maybe with a broken leg or some injuries, but not fatal, not death, right?
Not death.
Well, and that's what people don't seem to realize too. We have in the United States, we have the National Highway Transportation Safety Board, or whatever acronym it goes by. They mandate specific equipment be built into every new car, truck, SUV built and sold for the United States market. You have airbags, side curtain airbags, you have crumple zones, you have backup cameras that are now mandatory, anti-lock brakes, seat belts. All that equipment is now mandatory in a vehicle that is built and sold in the United States. That costs money. And those sensors and that technology that goes in there to make that airbag go off in a split second without blowing your face off or blowing the side of your brain out when it goes off as a safety curtain airbag, it's not cheap, and people, I don't want that. Well, you know what? The first time you don't have it and you smash your head, who are you going to sue when you get your spouse or your child gets an injury that could have been prevented by that airbag? Well, who are they going to do? Well, I'm going to sue the OEM. I'm going to sue General Motors. But I don't want that shit in my car. Yeah. People, like I said, granted, they do take, when it first comes out, when you're developing the technology, it's more expensive. When it becomes, when that life cycle matures into that process of building these pieces, it's a wash. An airbag in a car anymore is a wash. And those are not built in-house. Those are built by third-party companies outside of GM, Ford, Chrysler, whoever else. They're built by another company. The sensors are built by another company. All that stuff is taken to, like, next year, out here in Saginaw, Michigan. They build the steering columns. So they build the steering columns. They put the steering wheels on. They put the airbag inside that thing, put the Chevy or Chrysler logo, whatever vehicle is going in, on that airbag, because it's built, again, down an assembly line for whoever's making it, for whatever cars that company is ordering it. They go down the assembly line. They put all those pieces into it, because all those gears and a lot of that stuff, I mean, yes, they're built at next year, but all the sensor technology and all that stuff is not their product. They have to order it from a company. It's delivered there, and then they put it in the assembly. They ship it to GM. It gets put in the car. The worker on the assembly line grabs that steering column, bolts it in place. So there's, what I would say, 50 people have touched this steering column before it even gets into the car. Not only just the fact that all the components are built by another person, they're shipped from a warehouse that somebody touches, and it goes and received in a warehouse that somebody touches it and puts it on a shelf. Then it goes to the assembly line. Somebody bolts it into that assembly line. The final product goes into a warehouse. It goes into a truck. The truck's unloaded and received at the OEM. It goes to the assembly line. The assembly line worker touches it, puts it in a car. So you have multiple hands touching these pieces, and these people get wages, and those wages are built into the contracts for those components sold to GM or Ford, Chrysler, Honda, Toyota, Nissan. They have management structure. They have executive management structure. They have shareholders. Some of them are privately held companies, but still, it's a whole chain. That's why it's called supply chain. It's not. It's an integrated supply chain, but it's not a wholly owned subsidiary supply chain for GM, Ford, or any of those places anymore. I mean, outside of a few pieces like stamped metal, because now, because they're unibody construction, most of these vehicles, it's big rolls of steel come into the plant. They come down, they go into a sheet of steel, gets cut off of a roll by a machine and a worker. It goes into a room. It goes into a press. It's stamped for the shape of the vehicle that goes in, and it goes into a queue as the other pieces are, and then it goes in front of a robot welder, and it welds the vehicle together, those pieces that form the body of the car, and it's all stamped steel. Then it goes through through the assembly process, through the dunk tank for the anti-corrosion, the paint booth, and then it goes out into the shop floor where it's all the nuts and bolts are bolted on, pieces are bolted on, and it comes out the other end, a final assembly. So
it's a huge process.
It is. It's because when I seen the whole end-to-end process, and it wasn't even the United States. It was down in Brazil at the Commissary Ford plant, which is now closed. When I was down there, we went in and I watched the roll of steel come off a truck. So the steel is made by a steel company. So just think of this: the iron ore that was mined, the miners mine this stuff. It's put on a truck. It goes to a forge that forges the ore into steel. It's into a roll. It gets put on a truck. The truck goes to the Ford plant. The truck is unloaded by someone. The steel's taken into a part of the plant where it's put on a big spool where it rolls out a chunk. The machine cuts it off, or the employees make sure that the machines are doing what they're supposed to do. And as it goes down the assembly line, stamped, welded, dunked, painted down the assembly line. All those people touch it, and down there they make on average, what, $1.50 an hour. It's the whole process though, from end to end. Ford doesn't own all that stuff. I mean, they had down there in Commissary plant, all of their components were integrated into the plant. So the company I worked for that did the window seals, the fluid transfer lines and brake lines, and fuel injection and rails and stuff like that, they made that. But inside that plant was also the company that made the exhaust systems for those vehicles. It was made on site. The seats, Lear had their own plant on site integrated into that plant. So everything was assembled inside that plant. So it didn't have to come from all over the place there. It was already there. And a little robotic tug drove around the plant picking up stuff and taking it to the assembly line as needed. It was kind of interesting. It was very efficient. And I guess, the U.S. plants could learn something from that. But talking to one of the Ford people down there, they're saying that down there, because they have no unions in Brazil at the time, that it wouldn't have been it wasn't an issue down there, because if everybody worked together. We're here, like if Bentler Automotive, Forcia Automotive, Cooper Standard Automotive, Lear, and all that. Well, some of them would be unionized, some of them wouldn't, and they wouldn't work together. Those plants would be like the assembly line workers. Well, I ain't working with them scab bastards. While my union brothers are over here working their nuts off, these guys are over here, doing whatever. So that's where their big issue would come into play.
What do you say to the anti-union rhetoric? These UAW workers are asking for too much, and all they're going to do is end up pushing the big three to move all production overseas.
Yeah.
Why is that not a valid argument?
It's not a valid argument, because the one thing that's keeping those production plants here is your unions. I mean, yes, the United States market is way too big to have all your production offshored. That's why Toyota, Nissan, Honda, all of them built plants here in the United States, because the cost of building all that stuff overseas and supplying the United States market. I mean, the United States auto market is the second biggest in the world, next to China's.
Right. And then even those companies, because they're anti-union and they're in the South and non-union states, they use fear as well to say, well, if we have to pay higher wages, we will just build the plants everywhere else. And it's a bunch of horseshit is what it is.
Yeah.
It's a lie. It's intimidation.
It's intimidation. It is. But because, I mean, yes, Mexico and Canada have their plants and stuff, but Canada has their, was it CAMI is their union? The Canadian Autoworkers is a different union than UAW. And some Mexico plants are now unionized, but those are so corrupt down there that they are trying to force them out, because, with the new USMCA that Donald Trump, which was NAFTA light, put into play, all it basically did was give the Mexican auto workers more leverage to form unions to get better pay.
Right. It didn't do anything.
It didn't scare anybody to move the plants back to United States like everybody thought it was going to do. But those plants are not going to move, because the United States auto market is way too big. And the logistics alone wouldn't, you can't do it. You just can't, because you'd have to move. How many millions of cars are sold in the United States every year, in Canada, and you can't put that.
Going to happen.
It's not going to happen. No, I mean,
bottom line, all it is a fear tactic. And the people that are screaming this, the average Joe who's screaming this, just does not understand how anything works.
And a lot of those people don't realize either. They don't like unions is because they told everyone. The stupid thing is, everybody that bitches about how they hate unions, they always revert back to the Jimmy Hoffa story. And it is so goddamn stupid, so dumb. Yes, there's corruption in the unions. Yes, they just had that big deal with UAW a few years ago, and the guy went to prison about it. But you know what? The UAW members had enough of, they held him accountable, and the guy's now sitting in a federal prison. But they all go back to Jimmy Hoffa. Oh, he was a crook. He did this. He did that. Yeah, like, yeah, you're going to have bad apples and bad,
And that was at the beginning of all of this. It was really the beginning of very early on in the life of unions in this country. Everything was corrupt.
Well, you can look back.
Everything's corrupt today, but it's a matter of holding people accountable,
right,
and giving people their damn fair share.
Well, and again, when the way you look at it is, when people have money, what do they want? They want more money, and they want your money. And then if you have to work for them, they don't want to pay you. And I tell people this, when you hear people complaining about baseball players, football players, basketball players, how much, they're, oh my God, they're making millions. Well, if somebody offered you $25 million a year to play football or to do what you do, would you tell them no?
Right.
Hell no, you wouldn't. You'd be like, hell yeah, I'll take the 25 mil. And anybody bitches about it, the hell with them. I'm getting mine.
Well, and you look at it in terms of profit, and we live in a capitalist society, and there's a lot of problems with a capitalist society. And there's a lot of problems with the market, quote unquote, determining what someone's value or worth is as an employee. And that's what a lot of these people are screaming is like, let the market decide what these UAW workers are worth. No. When you have a $21 billion profit and each of those three CEOs are upwards of 30 million annual salary for one person,
Uh,
what the UAW workers are asking for is not unreasonable, and it's a living wage at this point. Real minimum wage in 2023 should be about $28 an hour. The average UAW worker at the big 3 makes $18.54 an hour. $10 an hour. Some of them are even struggling without benefits. They can't even put food on the table and a roof over their head with the cost of living in 2023. They've received a 9% raise since 2012 overall, while CEO pay has increased. I think it's 49. It's either 46 or 49%
it
in
was
that same.
39% alone in the last 3 years
Yeah,
for
it's insane,
Barrera and Fairley. Um,
right?
but the thing of it is I listened to I've been listening to the radio down in Detroit when I'm out working, um, and I listen to these people call up and they complain. A lot of these people that call up complain is they assume that they're, for whatever reason, they think that they should be thankful to have a job, and they're thankful that they have a job because if their employee pays them $12 an hour, that's great. Oh, I have money coming in, blah 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 blah. But if you're making $12 an hour, what is your employer taking in on your labor? I mean, yes, you have to charge an hourly rate commensurate to what you're to make a profit for yourself and to cover your expenses. That's just business. But these people that say that, well, if you have a company that's making, again, like GM and them that made 28 billion this in the first quarter,
21 billion
21
in the
billion.
first 6 months. Yes,
Yeah.
21 with a B.
And then when you hear the CEO of
Profit,
GM go on there and say, well, her pay is based on 92% of her pay is performance based. I'm like, really? So your performance
nothing.
based, your performance pay is based on the stock price. So why is it that you spent all these billions of dollars buying back your common stock to drive that price up to show that, oh, you're doing well? Oh, because that's right. It's tied to your pay. So if you actually didn't buy all these stock options back, your pay would be less. And you don't want that, huh? Go figure. You don't want less money. So the people on the assembly line that actually building the product that you sell, that's making that stock price go up, 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 up. Yeah, the hell with them.
Without your employees, and this is to any business, as a business owner myself, as you as a business owner, to any without your employees, you have no business. You have zero business. Without your employees, you don't have a product to sell unless you're going to sit your ass down and make it on your own. You don't have it.
Yeah.
So you have to pay them a fair share and a living wage.
And
Living wages where they can raise their families and put roofs over their heads and food on their table. It's basic living. It's all they're
yeah.
asking for. They're asking for basic living.
Well, and the funny thing of it is you look back when we grew up in mid Michigan. What did we hear when we were little? What was the thing that everybody in our family told us?
I'm not
Get
sure
out
what
of
you're.
high school. Get out of high school. Go
Oh
work at
yeah,
the
go work at
foundry.
the factory.
Go work at the
Yep,
foundry. Go work at the
yep,
foundry. Yeah, when you get out of high school, just go work at yeah, you don't even have to graduate high school. Go work at the foundry.
yep, yep.
Back in the
True.
60s and 70s between Saginaw, Bay City, and Flint, we'll even include Flint in this. How many hundreds of thousands of GM jobs was there? There was about 100, estimate about 110,000 GM jobs in the Tri-City area alone. And not even mention Dow Chemical, Dow Corning, all those tied into that. That basically made the Tri-City one of the biggest economic hubs in Michigan back in those days. I mean, you had Bay City at one time, my hometown, in the 50s and 60s had almost 60,000 people living here. After GM started laying off, closing plants, as they started divesting getting out of the component business and all that stuff, they started closing up plants. And thanks to Ronald Reagan allowing everybody to offshore their jobs because they could make more money and they could just keep with the bare minimum here. All those plants closed, people moved away. There was nothing here. Oh, let's make it a tourist town. Well, look at the town now. You got less than 35,000 people. The average income here is what, 20 grand? The hospital is the biggest employer, and they treat their employees like dog shit all the time because our mother worked there for 30 plus years, lost her pension, lost her union benefits were frozen, and she worked 35, almost 40 years at that place, and she
She was
got
over 40 years.
yeah, she
Over
gets
40 years.
$600 a month because everybody was afraid.
Her pension is
Yeah,
$420 a month.
$400 because the people in her union decided, you know what, the hospital is right. We have to keep our jobs, so we'll concede to them everything that we need for not even a decent retirement, a manageable retirement.
It was a minute raise that they got. It was some obscene number like $1.25 an hour or some bullshit like that. And with that, my mother retires with a $420 a month pension and no
No
health
healthcare. Yeah,
insurance from a
worked
hospital.
for a hospital, no healthcare when you retire. Huh. Well, they're talking about going on strike over here now at the hospital. The nurses are about ready to walk out, and the CEO of the hospital here just said something profoundly stupid in the news, talking about, oh, our hospital here is known for the quality service. I'm like,
No, it's
no, it's
not.
not. Um, it's got the acronym Bay Dead for a reason. But yeah, well, because there were, one girl I know that was a nurse there. At one time, she was taking care of 30 patients by herself. One person, 30 patients, which is illegal. And she had to, so basically, in her 8-hour shift, she would have to spend 2 minutes per patient continuously without a break, going to the bathroom, continuously 2 minutes per patient, 30 people around the clock, taking care of them. Now, if there
This
was
is
an
why
issue
we
with,
had unions, and this is why we
yeah,
had unions. Because this belief from these anti-union people and the anti-union rhetoric that we have all of these malevolent corporations who are just gonna just fawn at the feet of their employers and take care of you when they do well are delusional, because it's never happened in the history of humanity, and it's never going to happen in the history of humanity. We have always had to fight for everything that we have. And there's another argument with the UAW asking for a 32-hour work week. And I was having a conversation online with a gentleman, and he was telling me that we can't allow quote unquote such entitlements to happen. I'm like, entitlements? Entitlements? A corporation, a business doesn't own us as people. They don't even own our labor. There's an exchange for our labor. And there needs to be a fair exchange for our labor. And there are plenty of studies out there that have proven that a 32-hour work week is way more efficient and effective than a 40-hour work week. And that's what they said when we fought for the 40-hour work week back in the day, when unions first started during the Industrial Revolution. It's entitlement, because we had
holiday pay, time and a half, double time.
kids dying on goddamn assembly plants and people working 90 hours a week, 14-hour days,
Yeah.
or maybe even some of them even more than that.
Well,
We've had to fight for everything that we have. And so it's a dead argument. It's a
well,
dead freaking argument.
I would say to the people this: go look at Foxconn's reputation in China. Now, Foxconn makes the iPhones for Apple. When I was going through my master's program at Northwood University, we were talking about this. This was back in 2010, 2011 timeframe. Um, Foxconn had to go around their factory. It was a several story tall building in China. They had to put nets that extended out 15 feet around the building, because you had people going up to the top of the building, throwing themselves off, committing suicide because they were working 90 hours shifts without breaks, not even taking a piss. They had to piss themselves on the assembly line for the iPhone. So think of that. Every time you pick up your iPhone 15 and you pay $1,000 for it, that worker made 15 cents an hour, worked 90 hours straight to build them damn things. And they got to the point where they just figured, I can't do this anymore. And they went and fucking launched themselves off a building and committed suicide. Well, Foxconn, well, that looks bad for us. We got to put fishing nets out there to catch them.
Yeah, isn't that horrific?
So imagine,
and that's the mentality that we're dealing with the
yeah.
with these companies that don't want to pay.
Well, it's even not even the companies that
And
want to pay. It's the
and the
people. They think,
threats.
well, my company would never make me do that. Well, they let me take time off, and I'm like, you know what?
If they
Get
could get
sick.
away with it, they would do it.
Get.
What we allow them to
I
get
tell
away
these.
with, they will absolutely do.
I would tell these people this: I hope you don't get sick. You don't get something catastrophic happens to you. I don't wish that on anyone. But if something like that were to happen to you, and you had cancer, and you had to take time off from your treatment because you're too weak to move, you're puking, you're dying, basically. See how long your job's going to be there in a non-union instance where that company is like, well, you're important to us, but you're not that important. We need to fill that role. So say la
Bye.
vie.
And you don't have insurance anymore
Yeah,
either.
your
You're on
insurance.
your
Oh
own.
yeah, yeah.
You're on your own.
see how that company is going to wrap their arms around you and embrace you. Oh, we'll pay for your cancer treatment. Oh, your job will be here when you get better. Oh, your wife died or your children died. Well, gee, you can have 2 days off and then you got to be back to work. Your funeral, you got to plan a funeral. Oh, we'll give you 48 hours and then come back to work.
You're
No,
going
you're
to have
not back in
a
40
baby.
hours.
You have
Yeah.
4 weeks.
Well, that's what I don't. And everybody bitches about all these. They don't understand the way the labor is in Europe. Why do you think Europeans on an index are generally more happier people than you are in the United States? A woman gets pregnant, she gets what, a year off
Yeah,
in
you're.
Europe with
Yep.
pay.
Yep.
After 10 or 15 years of working for a company, if they fire you in Europe, they have to pay you until you find a new job.
Yeah.
Well, imagine that. That'd be awesome here.
Yeah.
But I
But you
mean,
need to be thankful. You need to be
yeah.
thankful and bend over backwards that you can't afford to put food on the table for your family or buy a house, because the difference between the cost of living and your starvation wages isn't quite making it every week.
Well, it goes back to what the steelworkers first started to go back in the 1800s, and Andrew Carnegie's steel plants in Pennsylvania were being integrated, and they were trying to go union. They hired the strike busters. They come in there and they physically beat people with bats and bricks and shot. People were actually killed fighting for the right to collective bargaining and fair wages. The sit-down strike in Flint back in the 40s that birthed the UAW.
That was 36 and 37.
Yeah,
November 13th was the
the
first one.
governor of Michigan sided with General Motors and sent in the National Guard to try to break them out and kick them out of that building.
Right.
I mean, think of that.
And General Motors prior to that sit down strike spent almost $1 million on private investigators and people to intimidate people who wanted to form a union. Instead of paying people, they spent nearly $1 million to try to scare them instead.
Well, Nissan Motor Company did the same thing down about, I would say, several years ago. Now I can't remember the exact time frame. When I was down in Jackson, Mississippi, where Nissan has their big North American assembly plant down just outside Jackson. The people down there were trying to unionize. They were talking about it. Nissan forbid them and threatened their jobs. They would be fired if they brought in illegal because of the the federal labor laws we have here in the United States. They threatened people's jobs if they brought the UAW representatives onto the campus there and talked to the employees about forming the union. Nissan used all the old tricks in the book, scare tactics. Well, we'll close the plant. We'll move it to Mexico. We'll, if you get unionized, yes, you'll get more money, but it'll make us less profitable. And then we won't be able to do this. We won't be able to do that. Horseshit.
Wah. Yep.
So the union vote down there, it barely failed. I mean, barely failed. But you had the people down there that were scared shitless that they were going to lose their job, kind of like mom at the hospital. People she worked with, if we go on strike, I'm going to cross the picket line because I need this job. Not the fact that you're stabbing everybody in the back. You're
including yourself.
Yeah.
You're undermining yourself as well and your well-being. Yeah, I was having a conversation on text the other day. I have a group of friends in Alabama that I have a chat with, and my friend Tim and I were talking about this because a lot of the automotive industry has moved to Alabama pretty significantly over the past decade. And Huntsville is like the 5th largest tech hub now in the United States. Alabama is a right to work state. It comes in last in poverty and education and women's rights and like literally just about everything. But he's like, if you ask the average, and in these assembly plants down there, they start out making $13, $14 an hour and they're not unionized because they believe this rhetoric and this scare tactic that if you fight to unionize, well, we're just going to close up the plant and we're going to move away, which is all, as you and I both know, is a crock of horse shit, as we've discussed. Not going to happen. But if you ask those people, he said, if you ask them, they're going to say the quality of life is a lot better. And it has because so much more industry has come there, but they struggle. They struggle when they don't have to struggle. Like they're barely making it.
The quality of life now is decent, but wait, as the cost of living increases with all these other things moving in there,
already there.
But it becomes sustainable because they'll be priced out of everything. The housing market,
and it's already happening. It's happening across the board. It's happening.
But the funny thing is, in Alabama, one of the biggest luxury brand cars in the world is
Mercedes is
assembled. Yeah, Mercedes is built in outside of Birmingham or not or Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
yeah, one of my
Outside of
friends
there.
works
Yeah,
there. One of my friends on my chat works there at the Mercedes plant. Yeah. And so I hear this stuff and it's just like people have to stop believing. People have to stop settling for shit and start fighting for the value as human beings because a corporation is going to try to undermine you every step of the way. They cut your knees out from under you. They don't
it's
give a
all
shit.
about shareholder value. They don't care about their
Yes,
employees.
you
It's
have to fight.
shareholder value. Every
Everybody
company.
should unionize because we cannot put the trust in corporations. History has proven it over and over and over and over again. And your 40-hour work week, your health insurance, your benefits. Thank you.
To
Thank you,
unions.
unions.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
for that.
For paid time off for weekends.
Yeah.
That's it goes back to the labor laws changing back in the 1800s and the early 1900s here. When Ford Motor Company started the assembly, and Henry Ford actually, his idea was actually, I wouldn't say great, but it was in the right direction. He's the one that came up with paying a 40-hour work week and a wage where people could afford to buy the product that they're producing. Now, not saying he was a great guy because he was
40-hour work week
anti-Semitic.
the 40-hour work week didn't come about until the
No,
Industrial
Ford.
Revolution.
You go Ford Motor Company when they first started the assembly lines down in Detroit with the Model T. They started off with that, not 40-hour work week. Was it? I think it was 40-hour work week, and the wage was like $5 a day or something like that, which would afford the people building the Model T to actually buy a Model T. So it's
Yeah,
nowadays.
that's the thing. Like your workers, your UAW who makes 18.54 an hour, they're not even going to be able to buy a $46,200 vehicle. It's not going
Well,
to
that's the thing. Well, look what's happened in the last decade and a half. What vehicles are being produced in the United States? SUVs, trucks. All small cars have gone by way of the dodo bird almost exclusively. Why? Because GM, Ford, and Chrysler convinced you that you need those vehicles to be able to do your daily routine and everything else like that. And oh, by the way, a base model starts at $48,000 for a Chevy Tahoe, and their profit margin on that is so big. They're like, hell yeah, buy away.
we
Just like,
we looked at the Suburban this year. T and I went and we did some test drives and we were going through it. A 23 Suburban, it was like $88,000 and would have a mortgage. We would have had a $1,200 a month car payment. A
and guess what?
mortgage. I'm
And
like,
you
that
had
would
five
have been
years
my
to
damn house.
Yeah, and you had 5 years to pay it off, not 30 like a mortgage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. 5 years to pay it off. Oh, they've upped it to like they give you 6
72 months.
or
72
whatever.
months. Yeah,
Yeah.
72 months. Yeah.
And
But
interest rates right now are astronomical. So it was $1,200 a month. I'm like, yeah, that would be my house, is what it would be. I'd be living in my Suburban because I wouldn't be able to do anything else.
and
What
just think that Suburban is built on a platform the same as a Chevy pickup. Common components is a Chevy pickup.
yeah,
Common components is a Tahoe, the Escalade, the GMC Denali. Common components across the board, but yet you're paying the premium for
I
because
don't know. I
the
can't.
navigation system, sunroof. It's but like I said, the variations. Why do you think during COVID the auto companies, even though they were saying they had supply chain issues up the wazoo, but yet they were still turning a profit
Mhm.
because they were basically making cars to order.
They are to this day, they still do because they've increased the profit margin significantly doing it like
Well,
that.
I mean, and that because if Joe Schmo goes to the car lot and he wants a basic vehicle, how many basic vehicles do those dealerships carry? One or two,
Zero.
one or two. But
Not
they,
even. There wasn't even a
well,
basic model on the lot when we were looking.
I'm just saying, but very small. And if it is, it's one of the low price cars like
Yeah,
the
it'll
Chevy
be
Malibu or something.
exactly.
But those other ones, I need a Suburban, but gee, what is the only one you have on the lot is $78,000 and change. Well, the dealer, well, the GM will give you a $6,000 rebate.
Yeah.
We don't have any other. Well, we can't find another one with all the options, but we have this one here that's $88,000. Huh? Yeah,
Yep.
that's that made to order thing is now they're doing it because people will go in and they're like they can still charge you the premium on it, but they don't have to carry the inventory.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I just looked it up. And so, yeah, when Ford started, it was $5 a day, which at the time was an extraordinary amount of money
Yeah.
for anybody.
Yeah, Henry Ford
Especially
did
in
that
the
because he wanted the people at the plant to be able to afford to buy the car that they were building.
exactly.
But yeah, and that's not saying that Henry Ford was some great guy because, like I said, he was
No.
anti-Semite and
Yep.
everything else. But and I think I'm not for sure, but I think he was actually a Nazi sympathizer too. But no, but it all goes back to
He
this. They
he
is
announced the 8-hour, 5-day work week
yes, that's what it was.
in
8 hour day.
1926, but it was
Yeah,
1926 when he announced it.
but still,
Yeah.
now as you go to the other industries, though, they had like I said, people working on the assembly line day and night, never taking a break.
Mhm.
When you get
Like working
fatigued,
on it, and
when you're working at a job like this with moving machinery, you know,
that's why
a
there were so
two
many
ton,
deaths. There were so
a
many deaths.
8-ton vehicle coming down the assembly line is moving at what 1 or 2 miles per hour. If you're fatigued and you make a mistake and you get your hand or your foot or even your head out of alignment with that thing, it's going to tear your fucking head off and you're going to be dead.
Yeah.
So who in the hell would want to work a 36-hour straight shift? That's why I can't understand how doctors can operate for 36 hours straight, but an
Yeah.
airline pilot, a truck driver, after 8 hours, they got to take mandatory 10-hour breaks. But
Mhm.
a doctor, hey, let me operate for 46 hours straight.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
it's the automotive industry in this country. Most people don't have any idea how it operates anymore. It's not like I said, GM does not bring in everything in house. Everything 90% of their vehicle, or I would even say closer to 95% of their vehicle pieces are outsourced to a company. Even some of their powertrain components anymore are not even built in house. Like Ford and GM just um, developed a 10-speed transmission with a company. I can't think of it. It was either ZF or another company from Spain. And the only difference between it is the programming language when it hooks to the computer. That's the only difference. It tells it when to shift and how to shift by the computer, the code, and that's it. But yet it was developed. Ford and GM sat down and their engineers figured stuff out together. But this company builds it and then they ship it to GM or Ford, and it goes onto the assembly line. There's a company called Gestamp that builds the frames for the vehicles. They don't even build those in house half the time. Those are made by another company. They bring in the steel. It's cold rolled steel. They weld it together based on the fixture, the jig that they give them for the tool. It's called tooling. They put the steel on there. They weld it together, put it on a rack, and ship it to the plant.
Yeah.
That's not even done in house anymore. And then people wonder why there's all these GM jobs. Oh, the GM, they really didn't offshore it. They just moved it to
They
a
just
smaller company,
right.
and it's a smaller company that can pay less wages because their profit
And they're not
margin's
part
so
of the
much
UA.
smaller.
And those smaller companies, those offshoots, they're not part of the UAW.
Some of them are. Some of their plants are. Some of them aren't. So like when I worked at 4C and Cooper Standards, there are plants all over the U.S. Mainly, they're right around the hubs where the assembly plants were, because again, the JIT and all that. You had some that were UAW organized, and some that weren't. It just depending what state it was in and how many employees were at the plant.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I wasn't clear if like these smaller suppliers are able to unionize
They are.
with
Oh,
the
oh, they
UAW.
absolutely are.
With
UAW. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. They
I think
and
everybody should. I think everybody
you
needs
see
to unionize
you'll
it.
see outside when you pull up to the plant if it's union or not underneath the American flag. If they're a tier 1 supplier, they're either Q1 for Ford or GM tier something or other. You'll see those flags. That means that they reach the quality target that they're for building the parts for them guys. And underneath it, you'll see the UAW flag. So they do fly the UAW flag outside with the flags if it's a union plant. And then you'll see signs inside that says proud UAW membership and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. There are some aspects, again, yes, I am pro-union, but there are some aspects that I think the union really needs to work on internally. There are rat shit employees that work in these unions that take advantage of the system.
Oh, sure.
Um, and
But it
that
doesn't make
becomes
the
a
union
problem.
itself
No,
better.
it's not it doesn't make the union. It's just, but the union, you know what?
People need
The
to hold
union,
need to hold people accountable.
but the union will defend that worker to the death. They will go with them into the meetings. They will stand by them, even if they're a shitty worker. And if they're a good worker and they get in trouble, they stand by them. They stand by their members. They don't just throw anyone under the bus. And they make it hard for
Well,
those good
that
workers to
happens.
keep the shitty workers from being the ones that get in the news and
Yeah.
make it the UAW's, oh, this is bullshit.
I think that's with every union. You hear that with teachers union, and we
Oh, yeah.
definitely have a huge issue with the police union in this country right now.
Well,
I
the
think that
police
that
unions
happens
are,
with every union where you've got a slacker that makes the whole look bad,
yeah.
but
And
the
they're the ones that
whole
usually
is
make the headlines.
important to maintain
Yeah. Those
regardless of
slackers,
that one.
yeah, those shitty employees in the unions are the ones that usually make the headlines with everyone else because they're the ones that do the stuff that are profoundly stupid and
Right.
outside the you just can't wrap your head around why would somebody do that something that stupid, but and they're the
Right.
ones that make the news and then everybody just and then that water cooler talk. Well, the UAW's got all these shitty workers. Look what they do.
Right.
They
Right.
cause this company. They're going to cause this company to just drive the prices so high.
Yeah, it's obscene. To close with this, I say union strong. It's like the cost of a vehicle is so much more involved than people understand and realize. And hopefully, after listening to this, they'll understand and realize everything that goes into that now, get a little bit of a clearer picture of the bigger picture, so to speak. And that the intimidation tactics and the fear mongering of moving everything abroad is nothing but that.
Yeah,
It's
it,
nothing
it,
but fear and
there's
intimidation.
always going to be automotive manufacturing in the United States. Now, it may not be GM, Ford, or Stellantis or Chrysler, but you will have auto manufacturing here in the United States. I even said that after the 2008 crisis when GM and Chrysler went bankrupt and Ford was damn near bankrupt. Ford was about a heartbeat away from filing bankruptcy like everybody else because they had leveraged everything to the teeth a couple of years prior. And if GM and Chrysler hadn't got the bailouts that they did
They'd
in the
be
credit,
they wouldn't be
Ford was right behind them. If they wouldn't have got that bailout and the money loaned to them, Ford was going to be bankrupt too. And everybody keeps saying, "Oh, Ford was the only one that didn't take money handout." Oh, yeah, they did. They just didn't take the autumn. They didn't take it. They just took it in a different form. But it goes back to that. Back then, the union workers gave
they
to
gave
the
a
company
lot.
lots of the company to keep them the doors and lights open and lights on.
Yes.
And those companies took advantage of that, and they still have not lived up to their promises to some of
They
them union
haven't given
workers.
any of that back
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
They haven't. Not a freaking thing that they conceded did they give back. Not a thing. To help them through the toughest time. And they started making record profits as early as 2012. They've been making record profits for 11 years now. And they still haven't given their employees back what they lent them basically during the crash and to help prevent them from going completely out.
Yeah, it's funny too because then you hear people scream "Buy American," you know.
Nothing here is American anymore.
Speaking of Ford, Ford and
Assembled here.
GM, and even some Chrysler products, even though Chrysler is now owned by a foreign company,
Right?
nothing is 100% American made in this country.
Nope.
Uh, most of your components and electronics are made in China that go into your vehicles. The sensors, the radios, the wiring harnesses, the computers are not made here. They're made overseas. Hell, even some of your door panels are stamped in
Made
a
in China.
plant in China, and they're just put on in a container ship and shipped overseas. And they sit in a parking lot at another automotive supplier that just sequences them in when they go to your car. So, I mean, yes, the cars are assembled. Though Ford's new commercial is it's 100% assembled for the F-150 in America because Dearborn Truck Plant and Kansas City KCAP assembly make the Ford F-150. It's 100% assembled, not 100% American.
100% American any longer.
The most American-made car in the United States is
Kia, isn't it?
no, it's a Toyota Camry.
It's a Toyota. I knew it was Ford.
Assembled in Germantown, Ohio.
Yeah.
Most of the components in it are the most American-made components. Go figure.
Go figure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Willie. Thanks for joining me and giving us your expertise in this matter and helping clarify.
I wouldn't say expertise, but I just happen to have been in the automotive industry for 10 years, 10 plus years.
You've got an inside scoop for us, and you've got a lot, far more so than anyone else that is out there screaming anti-union and this rhetoric. So I'm going to have the link in our show notes to the crash
Video, yes.
video that we were
It's
talking
on
about
YouTube.
here. Yep. So the link will be in our show notes, and also have a little bit of a few more bits of information in there just for those of you who want to quote unquote do your own research. I'll help you out a little bit.
It's actually a 2009 Chevy Malibu versus a 59 Bel Air crash test.
Yeah,
It's a offset high.
crazy.
It's offset head-on collision. Like again, people, they don't make them like they used to.
Thank goodness.
Pretty damn glad they don't, because I like my head being above my shoulders. You know, I don't want it ripped off by an A-pillar being, in a crash.
No doubt.
And the fact that car outweighed the Malibu by, I would say, probably 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, it was
because that was all. Because those cars are all steel and no plastic back in those days.
Yeah, it was a tank. All right, so all that info, look for it on the show notes, guys. We will see you next time on Love Where You Live, or you will hear us next time on Love Where You Live.
And thank you.
Do you love our podcast and online content? Then you'll love our monthly print magazine plus 5 bonus magazines even more. Subscribe Plus 5 offers amazing adventures, stunning photography, and high-profile content you won't find in our free online magazine. Plus, you receive automatic entry into our monthly Spend Local Michigan and surprise pop-up giveaways, where you have a chance to win a monthly Made in Michigan goodie box and other awesome prizes like GoPros, kayaks, outdoor gear, and more. Subscribe Plus 5 today at livelovelocalmi.com.